Parents of identical twins. What was your honey? I switched the kids moment. I had a classmate that has a twin sister. One day her twin, her and her boyfriend, went from school by train. Classmate sat with her boyfriend and I sat with her sister. Boyfriend had to use the toilet and when he was gone, they got an idea. Apparently they never tried to switch to see if he would notice. So, they quickly switched some clothes. They were dressed similarly, changed their hairstyles and switched the seats. When he came back, he looked at one, confused, then at the other, repeated the action several more times, then looked at his girlfriend and was like really while he started laughing. My grandmother baptized the same kid twice. This is how you get the good evil twin thing. So with very few answers, I'll answer this with a summer camp story. We were playing capture the flag, but the teams got to hide their flag. Well, each team in my game had a twin on each team, and the one on my team walked over to the other team's side and asked to be reminded where their flag was. He grabbed it and ran back before anyone noticed it was the wrong one. Ultimate play right there. My cousin has 2 sets of twins. They are 21 months apart. She can tell them all apart. They are all teen boys now and damned if anybody else can. Not even their dad. The younger ones look like the older ones too. So that complicates things even more. It's like she and her spouse are running an illegal cloning operation out of their home. Good kids all of them. They take advantage of their situations to hilarious levels. They love cosplaying stormtroopers at conventions and pull pranks at school a lot. I've asked my cousin how she knows. She says it's little details. A tiny freckle on one, shallower chin dimple on the other, slight change in voices, different clothing styles. I'm glad she can keep it all straight. I could never. It would really frick with me meeting a group of stormtroopers and then they take their helmets off and all look the same. Mom of identicals here. Not really one moment yet, but I had them by C-section and for some reason it's always bothered me that I may have gotten them mixed up when we finally took the hospital bracelets off. They had no real differences as infants, so I think about that at least 5 times a day. They're 4 now. Identical twin here. My dad intentionally swapped our id bracelets many times when we were infants in order to stop any argument about who was older. His words. Once in my very large high school, I had a teacher stop mid-lecture and stated, "You're not twin A. Go switch back." When twin A came back to classroom, he was really embarrassed at getting caught and asked how she knew. She didn't have an answer, but apparently they had switched on at least 2 other occasions. Most people in the class didn't even know he was a twin. Whoa, that's some attentive teacher. A bit late to the party. I'm not a parent, but 2 of my brothers are twins. Unfortunately, twin 1 passed away about a year ago. During the wake we had tons of pictures of him, like way more than even I expected. And one thing my mom would do with them whenever we were somewhere or doing something photo worthy is take 3 pictures, 1 of each twin and then both together. About halfway through the wake my family realized my mom had accidentally chosen 1 picture of twin 2. Every other picture but that one was of twin 1. Nobody else at the wake noticed. Even the extended family couldn't tell them apart. Weirdly, it was actually a light-hearted moment. My whole family found it funny that just the one detail slipped through the cracks. We joked that even now both twins were still doing something together. I think we just needed something to laugh at during that time. Identical twin here. When I was 4, we were at Disney World with all my cousins who are around the same age. I wandered off for just a minute, and my family took that time to move on to go somewhere else. When my mom was doing a head count, my brother moved and she counted him twice, so it took them a few minutes to realize I was lost. Some nice strangers saw I was crying and noticed I was lost, and helped look for my family. My dad eventually spotted me, and hopped over a 7-foot fence to come get me. Security didn't like that very much and they almost kicked him out, but everything worked out in the end. Your brother knew what he was doing. He wanted you to be left behind. Keep a close eye on him. He might murder you and pretend to be you. My dad has an identical twin. Until I was about 4 years old they'd sometimes pretend to be the other to mess with me. After that age I could pretty easily tell them apart, but I couldn't, and still can't, really articulate how to do it to other people. It was just like it's easy. My uncle has a softer face. They have identical looking noses, cheekbones, jawlines, facial hair, etc. Neither is really noticeably fatter than the other or anything. Looking at them side by side, there's not really anything that actually looks softer on my uncle's face than on my dad's face. But if I'm pressed to describe how to tell them apart, that's the only way I can come up with to describe it. My mom and brother and sister and aunt and cousins all agree with that too. But if you try to objectively find what about his face is softer, you can't do it. Mine are only 16 months old, but to us they look different. They have different head shapes. Normally a baby will settle in the pelvic bone leading up to birth. Well, they both can't do that, so one has a more round head while the other's is more oval. So while they have the same features, their head shapes gives them each their own appearance. One has a faint birthmark on his left arm, so I will know if they ever try any tomfoolery or bamboozlement. I will say I verbally get them tossed around. Baby B has been climbing things and getting into mischief lately. Then all of a sudden baby A decided to do the exact same thing. So my default instinct was baby B, don't. Baby A, you, stop that. I verbally get them tossed around. Yeah, I do the same thing with my non-identical, 8 years apart kids. My mom is an identical twin, mirror twins. Her twin lives across the country, but when they get together they find it hilarious to get the same haircut, dress the same, and even record voicemails for each other. Her twin has a slightly stronger accent. Full stop. There was nothing more frustrating as a teenager than coming home and lamenting to my mom and suddenly she goes, "I'm not your mom, ha 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 ha." When they were kids, they often swapped dates with each other, and my mom even tricked her twin's date into buying her chocolate, teddy bear and flowers on Valentine's Day. They also took tests for each other. Growing up, my grandmother would get confused because as infants and toddlers they'd always somehow end up in the same crib or bed and she would confuse who was who. To this day, they still have their own language from childhood and get feelings when the other is in emotional turmoil. Haha, my grandfather and his twin brother were like this. They actually wrote and published a book with a chapter in it detailing all the debauchery they got into. My favorite story was that they had to renew their driver's licenses and one of them couldn't make the appointment. So one of them just went twice and just put on a hat the second time. LMAO. I'm father of identical twin toddler boys and a 9-month-old, so think I feel qualified to answer this one. Since my wife feels it's so cute to dress them the same, until they will tell us they don't want to. This happens a lot more than one may think acceptable. There are some very small tells that I can find on each, like one has a slightly different head shape and another has a vein on his forehead in a more distinct pattern from the other. Still hard to tell in dim light. For the most part now I usually try to get them to turn themselves in, almost like a Jedi mind trick. For instance, when one gets in trouble and is looking guilty, pretty obvious for a 2-year-old, I ask who did it and he inevitably names first the baby, then the dogs, then his brother's name first, conveniently leaving out his own. What does the other one say? On my high school swim team we had a pair of identical twins. For anyone that doesn't know how swimming works, there are 4 different strokes: backstroke, breaststroke, butterfly, and freestyle. An IM individual medley is when all stroke are put into one race. One of the twins, A, was better at backstroke than twin B. Meanwhile, B was better at breaststroke. At this particular meet, our coach decided to put them together in an IM relay where A would swim breaststroke and B would have to swim backstroke. The only way you could tell the twins apart was by their swim caps. They decided to switch swim caps and swim for each other on the relay. None of us noticed until the year after when they told us. Since this is a fun question that hasn't gotten many responses, I will say I knew a set of identical triplets in high school who'd sometimes go into one another's classes and mess with people. Made for a fun April Fool's Day joke. Had twins in most of my classes that did this in high school too. My dad was an identical twin. As a small kid, the first time I met his twin, my dad wasn't there. I jumped into my uncle's arms and immediately sensed something was wrong. According to my mother, I jumped down and ran away and hid. Just like a scene from a movie. I'm sure he didn't respond quite right. Held his arms at a different angle, or didn't hug you with the usual squeeze. Touch has a rich vocabulary all its own. Took all 3 to the park. I have boy-girl twins. Twin 1 had a big purple star on the back of her coat. Hood up. She was sliding down the twisty slide. I got distracted by the other two. I had had enough, so scooped the kids up to go home. To my horror, I had picked up the wrong kid. This other little girl had the same big purple star on her coat. She was the exact same size and everything. But up too. I only noticed when her dad yelled at me, "Oh, that my kid, no hard feelings but a little embarrassing." My twin boys are 13 now. I've never mixed them up, but when they were younger I used to address them with very generalized words like son and buddy. It sounds like, at some level, you worried that you might mix them up. I don't think calling the wrong name is such a big deal. My dad regularly called me by my brother's name, and we're not even twins. We're 6 years apart. Coached high school football for a few years, and there was identical twins on the team. During two-a-days, one of the boys was wearing a crop shirt under his shoulder pads, and I was able to notice he had a giant scar on his stomach from appendix surgery. Anyway, I was very excited because I thought this be the way I could start to distinguish between the kids. Turned out both of the boys had their appendix taken out, so I had to go back to the drawing board on that one. But by the end of the year I figured out which one was which. Always tell by the shoes. That is how I could tell the twins I wrestled with apart. Rarely do they switch shoes. We have 3-year-old identical triplets, and for the most part I can tell the difference just based on their coughs. But I will say that often I find myself calling out for one of the kids that I'm actually holding in my arms. When I worked at Circuit City during college, I worked with a pair of identical twins. Not only were they the can't tell you guys apart level of identical, but they had a very distinct look, being darker skinned African Americans with large afros, and this being the middle of Missouri. Over the course of my time there, the following situation played out multiple times where twin 1 would be working with a customer and head back into the warehouse to find something. Customer would wait for a while, then spy twin 2 working with a different customer elsewhere in the store. Customer would storm over to twin 2 demanding why they were talking to another customer when they should be in the back finding their TV or whatever. Twin 2 would laugh and explain that their identical brother worked there as well and that he would probably be back out in just a second. Customer would get super angry that twin 2 was obviously trying to trick them and would be just about halfway through their "what kind of idiot do you think I am" speech when twin 1 would reappear with their TV or whatever. The customer would do a double take and either apologize profusely or quietly step away and pretend that nothing had happened. Don't know why we didn't just stop scheduling them to work the same shifts. The manager secretly thought it was hilarious. My best friend's dad got drunk one night and confessed that while they know the older twin is named Gary and the younger twin is named Bill, he was giving them a bath when they were a month old or so, and he lost track of which one was which. He never told the mom, just put one back in the Bill outfit and the other in the Gary outfit. This happened 2 other times before they were 2 years old, and he says by this point he has no freaking clue if he's the original Bill or not, or who is older. Both answered to both names when they were young, so he's pretty confident he fricked it up at least once. My grandmother is an identical twin and there's a couple stories. At my grandparents' wedding, my grandfather was dancing with my grandmother's twin sister and she said, "You know, this is the first time we've ever danced together," and he said, "Really? I never knew which one of you I was dancing with at the high school dances." Also at my grandmother's funeral, my girlfriend at the time nearly crapped her pants when she saw my grandmother's sister because she didn't know she was a twin. Also at my grandmother's funeral, my girlfriend at the time nearly crapped her pants when she saw my grandmother's sister because she didn't know she was a twin. With my sense of humor, if I had a twin, I would totally get in a coffin to scare the absolute frick out of a room full of people at a funeral. Honestly, pretty much every parent of identical twins will tell you that they don't really look all that alike to them. Obviously on the surface they do, but I don't think we've ever mistook one for the other. It's not one big thing that makes them different. It's lots of small things that you'd only really notice if you spent every day with them. A colleague has identical twins and he said while he can tell them apart with no problems in person, on pictures that are older than a year, if there is no context and only one twin is them, it becomes really hard. Not a parent, but I once bumped in a mate of mine at the local paintball field. Started chatting to him for quite a while. Then he revealed to me he has never met me and is actually my mate's twin brother. He never told me had a twin. Anyways, I was pretty wet behind the ears back then and this guy took me under his wing for the next year or so. Good times. I have identical twin boys, adults now. As a parent you really always do know who is who. But I did lose one once in a playground because I thought it was the same kid twice. They were about 4 years old, going up and down the slide. I was sitting on a park bench about 10 feet away reading a book but still watching them. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye I see one of them running towards the entrance, about 40 feet away. I was so confused. I had been watching one son going up and down the slide, thinking it was both of them. He was just doing it fast. It scared me so much I gave them 2 different haircuts the next week so it couldn't happen again, which turned out to be a great thing because now everyone could tell them apart, except outside in the winter, because hats. Twin girls, we have no idea if we still call them by their birth names or if we swap them accidentally. We decided to always dress them differently but midway we forgot which one was dressed how. I have a set of identical twins in my 3rd grade music class and literally the only difference is one is a ½ inch taller the other and has a slight tooth gap. So if they aren't by each other or smiling, I got a 50/50 chance. Not a parent, but when I was student teaching, I was in a 6-1 special education classroom. The grandma of one of the kids sent the wrong twin to school. They were both on the spectrum and the brother who accidentally came to our school was lower functioning and went to a school for children with developmental disabilities. The student we had was verbal while his brother was not. He didn't pay attention all day which we found strange but not out of the ordinary. The kicker was that he knew none of our names and he also took one of the aide's water bottles which is something he would haven't done. We found out the next day and it all made sense. Poor grandma. My younger sisters are mirror image twins. My father has never been able to tell them apart. The rest of us, mom, brother and myself, never had that problem. They used to mess with people and I used to get called out of class to confirm who was who after they started school. I've also been called by the cops to confirm one is who she says she is because they will interchange their driver's licenses. They also fight constantly, so much so that they will even argue in their sleep if they're close to each other. My grandpa was a twin, but this is about his grandpa, who wasn't a twin. His family was one of the first Mormon families to live up in Canada, right where Cardston, Alberta is now, to be precise. They lived right next to a river, and would help other travelers and families cross it. About once a month, they would have a party at their house to catch up with neighbors and newcomers. The parents would often leave their babies on a bed to sleep while they talked with other adults, and take their baby with them when they left in the wee hours of the morning. My great-great-grandfather with his friends went in the baby room one night during a party, and switched the blankets on the babies. No one else knew what happened until morning, when they could see that the baby they were holding clearly wasn't theirs. So, for a few weeks, maybe even months, they were stuck with taking care of someone else's baby until they could finally get theirs back. I don't know what punishment my great-great-grandfather got for pulling that stunt. We distinguished our identical twins usually through different colored outfits, but as a backup we used blue toenail polish on the big toes of one boy. One day we have them in similar but not identical outfits and my wife is bragging to friends that she can tell them apart. She takes off the socks of the boy she has identified as A. Blue toenails. It's B. Wife starts to panic. Our tween daughter starts laughing. She switched the boys without my wife knowing. Good times. Wait, my parents could have switched us. Yes, and you might just be your brother. At my school we have this weekend trip where we go to a camp for the weekend. I had met this one girl, I'll call her Jay. When we went back to school, I saw her in the hallway and said hi Jay since I go to a huge school, 1,000 kids per grade. I didn't know she had a twin sister until the girl said sorry not Jay, I'm G. Jay is my twin sister. Jennifer and Jennifer. Wow, I am hearing about a lot of male identical twins. I wonder if there is a less probability of female identical twins. My twin sister was quite the rascal when we were young so she convinced me that we should switch classes. We were I think in 2nd or 3rd grade. Turned out she had a quiz. I still remember the pale green paper and just staring at it lol. Jokes on her when she got her grade back. Twin here. My brother and I used to take each other's classes at university. He would take my math class and I would take his English class. We only did it for one semester though because I failed his English class and he got an A in my math class. My twin, when approached by someone he doesn't want to talk to, will sometimes say, "Oh sorry, I don't know you. You must be thinking of my twin." He does this to people that he knows. He pretends to be me to get out of talking to people. My wife is an identical twin and I'd always wondered, even before knowing my wife, if some twin A at birth ever ended up becoming twin B at some point in infancy, so I asked my mill. She said it's possible she mixed them up at some point, but by about 3 months they both were different enough for her to tell. I dated a twin in high school. They would switch once in a while just to mess with me. Sometimes it worked and sometimes I figured it out. Identical twin here. My twin and I have always looked extremely similar. People I've known since childhood still have a hard time telling us apart, and we're in our 20s. But our mom tells us this story of how when we were around 2 we had just learned how to climb into each other's cribs. Usually they would hear a commotion over the baby monitor and then they would find us in the same crib. However, one time they heard us fussing over the monitor, so they came in to find one of us in each crib. At the time they had dressed us in identical pajamas, and they had no clue which baby was which. They ended up just having to guess who was who and forget about it. And from then on out we always wore different colored pajamas. Fraternal twin here. Me and my twin are night and day. He wears glasses. I wear contacts. He went to college. I stayed and learned a trade. Get the idea? Well crap. My grandma sure doesn't. 20 years on this planet and I still answer to my brother's name just out of the goodness of my heart. Don't get me freaking started on thing 1 and thing 2. Not a parent of twins, but when I was in school I was in classes with someone who had an identical twin. Their parents had divorced though and each twin lived with a different parent, one with mom and one with dad, but in the same zip code, and they swapped out on the regular, weekend with mom and weekend with dad, etc. Sometimes they would swap out which school they went to that weekend since they were in different Elam Middle High School districts, but in the same zip code. No one really knew the difference because they didn't know there were 2 of them. Was pretty entertaining sometimes. I dated one of them at one point and I could always tell when they swapped out because one wore her hair differently and had a specific scrunchie she'd use the other didn't have. For a long time I thought she was just messing with people and didn't actually have a twin. But some 15 years later I was in a grocery store and ran into both of them at the same time. This is by far the most insane one here. As a twin this is horrifying. IDK, what psychopath would remove the twins from each other? The bond twins have is very strong. For the first 21 years of my life I have only been apart from my brother for 1 week and it was horrible. I sold one of my twins to the circus so I wouldn't have this problem. I hope you sold the evil one. It's hard to tell the good one from the evil one when they are young. My little brothers are fraternal twin but look just alike to other people, even family members. When they were in kindergarten they switched classes. The teachers didn't notice and they only got caught because the kids in the class knew them apart. My mom had to leave work and talk to the principal even though everyone involved thought it was hilarious. Now that they're older a lot of people can tell them apart because one twin wears glasses. During Christmas one year my nephew kept calling his dad his uncle. Every time my brother would say, "I'm not your uncle, I'm your dad," my nephew replied, "No, your uncle," because my dad wears glasses. Also my sister-in-law will get a little drunk sometimes and will walk up to the wrong twin calling him babe and rubbing on his arm. He will just say "I'm not" and storm away. It's hilarious every time. My girlfriend is an identical twin. I haven't slapped the wrong butt yet, but I do know that when they were little they didn't have to paint one's toe to tell them apart, because when they were being taken out by C-section my girlfriend's forehead was nicked by a scalpel so she had a good inch-long scar to tell them apart. She still has it to this day and it was only getting bigger, but fortunately it's right on her hairline so you can't see it unless you're looking for it. I have identical twin boys. In 3rd grade, twin A stayed homesick. His name was called to win an award during an assembly and twin B accepted it for him and no one knew the difference. It's hard to tell who's who in baby pictures unless it is a picture of the 2 of them. The features I used to tell them apart need to be compared. The closest I ever came to a switch is when twin A crawled in my bed in the middle of the night. I thought it was twin B. I woke up several times because he was restless. In the morning when I realized I'd been thinking it was the wrong twin all along, it was the weirdest feeling. Something I thought was funny was that school first year called the twins wrong name. Yeah, they are identical but one have a wheelchair. That should give them a clue, but apparently not. Me as parent have taken wrong so many times when they were babies or sleeping. Never feed anybody twice though because they ate at same time. You have been visited by the IT lizard. Upvote or experience bad internet for a month. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.